Hey guys, welcome back to BWDT. It's kind of a weird moment for us here on the show. This is the first finale that we've ever had. It's the last episode of Season 1, but before we go on, we just wanted to say a gigantic thank you to everybody who's watched the show, everybody who's helped out with us on the show, and everybody who's especially talked to us on the show. The great designers, developers, and people that we've had talking to us have been an immense help, an immense resource for all of the members in our club and anybody watching these. Like I said a bajillion times, we don't do this for us, we do it for you guys and anybody who gives a crap about this kind of thing. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for everybody who's been on the show. But speaking of people who have been on the show, this week we get to sit down with a man named Mike Keogh. So Mike Keogh is the lead sound designer at a company called Breakfall. Breakfall is based out of Canada, and their biggest game is a game called Starwhal. It's a game about narwhals fighting in space. It's really fantastic. It's drenched in neon, feels straight out of the 80s. It's really fun. But what's interesting about Starwhal is that it actually started out as a game jam game. So they entered a competition, and the core mechanics of Starwhal ended up being their submission. But when they took it to a barcade in the area, they played it with some of their friends, and it ended up getting really, really good feedback, really positive stuff. People were loving it. And so they decided, hey, let's turn this into a full-fledged game, and now it is. It's released on Steam, it's got a browser-based version, and it's a really great game for its couch co-op playability. Like, you can sit down with anybody, have fun with it, figure out the controls. It's a hoot and a half. It's really a great game. But, yeah, so without any further ado, here's Mike Keogh.
So, why don't we start off with you telling us who you are and why we wanted to interview you.
Sure. So we're rolling now? We're good?
Yeah, we're rolling now.
Okay,
yep.
okay. Hi, I'm Mike Keogh. I have a lot of game-related experience with audio and game design are my two primary focuses. Most recently, and the reason I was asked to be here, Starwhal has been released on all major consoles and Steam, and I worked with a team of 6 people on that game. It started as a 48-hour game jam, and we've just sort of been growing it out from there.
So you guys are only 6 people strong.
Yeah.
Really? Where are you guys based out of?
Ottawa, Ontario. So the national capital of Canada, which has a sort of small but really cool growing indie scene here. Few local companies kind of rise and fall. Not a lot of major like game development companies here, but it's a neat place.
Do you guys actually have like an indie scene out there?
Yeah, there's a really cool group called the Dirty Rectangles in Ottawa, and they sort of try to get like indie devs together just to talk about their projects, see what's going on, talk about other cool indie games coming out. Mm-hmm. So those are monthly meetups, and I try to get to those whenever I can. We do also have, I teach a bit at the local college, and they have a game development program, which I'm not officially part of, but I know a lot of people who are teaching in it, and yeah, so there's a lot of game dev grads floating around, and that's really kind of giving rise to a neat kind of indie scene.
That's actually one of the things that we're kind of interested in, is because we have a lot of people who come here that are interested in game design, but they always end up leaving. So how did, like, I guess I don't know if you really know much, but like, how come they don't leave? How come they just kind of stayed in Ottawa?
Well, a lot of people with more industry experience do leave. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, I like it here. I just like the city. I have lots of family and friends here, so I'm trying my darndest to stay. There are a few companies that do kind of offer enough employment to keep, a base of people here. And then, like I was saying, there's this sort of new emerging indie scene, and that's more sustainable without big companies. It's just people trying to make a go at it right out of school. So either people make a few cool games, and it's enough to kind of make a living. After a while, a lot of people, unfortunately, do kind of leave Ottawa. So people tend to go to, because we're in Canada, Montreal or Toronto. We're both pretty nearby. Yeah. So those would be bigger kind of hubs. So yeah.
So is that kind of what happened with Breakfall then? You guys made Starwhal and just kind of stayed there?
Yeah, I mean, our first game was actually, and I say there's 6 people who worked on Starwhal. We were a sort of fluctuating team over quite a few years before Starwhal. So I was already working in the industry, and then my experience was all completely focused on sound and well, some design at that point. And I think I was the only person with a lot of industry experience. And my good friend Jason Nuyens, Jay, he had been doing web development, and he just one day had the epiphany that he wanted to get back to games. He sort of dabbled years and years ago, and he's like, Mike, I want to make a game. So we actually went to the local college and we recruited some people. We also got Jay's sister Beth. So we had quite a few people participate over the years. And what we wound up with was Marvin's Mittens, which you can play on Steam. Have you seen or heard of Marvin's Mittens?
When I checked out your guys' website, it was right on there or blog or whatever. It was, I don't know, like maybe I think it was your first one or second one or something like that on there.
Yeah, I mean, we have the two games sort of out and available to play, being Marvin's Mittens and Starwhal. But Marvin's Mittens is something I'm still really, really proud of. It wasn't the huge breakout hit, but it was really, really popular among those who played it. Quite a few people have played it, and it got a really, really good critical reception. Largely sort of more the buzz and reviews and everything was all focused on indie sites. So it wasn't a massive release, but it's just sort of this charming, fun. I like my kind of design thesis there was I wanted to see could you make a game that's like really engaging, really fun, but without any violent combat, without any hits or no danger, no peril. So it's this kind of Zen game, but it is an action platformer. And you just run around and collect, and very soft, experiential kind of thing. So. So we made Marvin, and we had people kind of come and go because it was over quite a few years, and it was very much a hobby project at that point. And we eventually got it out, and then we weren't really sure what to do next, and we tried prototyping a few things. Over the years, we'd done a few game jams, but Starwhal was the only thing that really, it just sort of took off right away because it was very immediately playable. It worked. Like the whole design was kind of there from day one. Like we got this thing. It was the jam itself was interesting because we kind of talked about like, well, let's do something like Quappy. I don't know if you know.
Yeah.
Quap is
it's infamous is what it is.
Yeah. So we wanted to do something silly and fun and physicsy like that, and we talked about sort of jousting games, about having unicorns, like all sorts of floppy things with that same idea. And I think I wasn't feeling that well. I decided at the end of Saturday I was actually going to go home and get some sleep. So we started on the Friday, all like late into the night on Friday. We were working on it. We're building the game, and then like Saturday night, 3 a.m, I woke up because I was getting texts from the guys, and they're like, "It's it's Starwhal, it's Narwhals now, and it's in space." So I was really excited to get back the next morning and see what that actually meant, I suppose. But it was Starwhal was what it meant, and it worked really well. So it was just this really, really silly thing, and we worked really hard on giving it a sort of a unique look, building out those weird neon cutouts. We debated endlessly because they were more cartoony originally than just weird things like the line width didn't work. That's a good little game jam or just general development thing is whenever you're working on art assets, make sure you occasionally zoom out to like kind of size on screen because they were drawn and I thought they were actually nice, the original ones, but the lines just looked really thin and weird and scraggly when they were actually small on screen. And so we kind of and we ended up tossing them. I mean, what we wound up with is in a way maybe more iconic, more silly, just the big smiling kind of neon cutouts. That were for a few reasons, but and so I did spend most of the weekend, kind of chipping in on design and advising what was going on. But really, my focus for that game jam was mostly audio. So I came up with like 3 of the tracks that are in the final soundtrack. So I just was going crazy on my very laptop, just sort of churning out weird 80s electro beats. And we had quite the debate about what is 80s. We knew we wanted that kind of aesthetic, but is like where do what do we need? We need cyber grid lines and we need chrome and flame, and the music was this, that, and the other, and but yeah, it sort of slowly came out. And so from there, the game got picked up for its mixture of weird nautical innuendo metaphor because it did also used to have a different subtitle. I don't know if you know this.
It did have the hilarious subtitle.
Yeah. So we used it was just the tip, and we sort of quietly dropped that after a while for a few reasons. That was a big debate, and we kind of just eventually let it go because it was bothering some people. We have a big blog post about that on our site.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I do think that there were a bunch of gaming sites that really had a field day just because I mean it is like there's nothing inherently really adult about it. I mean you can sort of read that into all the bumping and flopping and things, sure. But it's just silly. But yeah, for whatever mixture of just, the core gameplay is fun, it's different, brightly colored, just wacky out there experience. Like it got talked about a lot, like quite a bit of just sort of immediate, that sort of sought after viral buzz. I think a big part of that too was that we put it out for free because it was Unity, and at the time Unity ran in most web browsers. It's really too bad that they're slowly stripping that out. But we had the game. We got a website and we just put it up, and people were playing it. Like a lot of people have played it. We've had I don't know, like hundreds of thousands of unique users in, and I assume in most cases that's at least 2 people. So quite a lot of people have experienced the free to play version. Which we still try to keep updated and working, but at this point I don't know what browsers it even runs in because of the Unity issues. So
they ran on the Unity web player then? I didn't know they were getting rid of that.
No, it's not supported for sure in Chrome anymore. I don't know if it was a security thing or what, but
that
just doesn't run.
Okay.
Yeah, it's lame.
Yeah.
It was fun. But.
So what was the theme for that game jam then? Or was there a theme?
Yeah. It was Heartbeat.
It was called Heartbeat?
Yeah. It was actually Global Game Jam. I don't know if you ever participated.
We're planning on it next semester, actually.
Yeah, Global Game Jam. It's great. It's really neat. It just like what a great idea have like world over Game Jam. So that's the one we try and participate in every year. This year, only one Breakful member actually attended, and I wrote a little bit of music from offsite for him. Mm-hmm. But it's Global Game Jam's great. So the theme of the Heartbeat, so that's why the central idea is poking them in the heart.
Yeah.
It's kind of hilarious because I actually never really fixed in the audio mix. There is a heartbeat that sort of thumps when it goes into slow motion. You get in there close. It's not as prominent, or it certainly wasn't in the original Game Jam version. It was kind of hard to hear. I don't know. I just did a bad job mixing those bass frequencies. Anyways, but yeah, the heartbeat is sort of why there's that whole like heart, and poking that is the main goal. Yeah,
that's crazy. Like I of all the things I would have expected, Heartbeat was not one of them.
Yeah, it's fair enough.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that, we, like I said, we have our own game jams at Iowa State, and we're planning on expanding that out. And so, we're really trying to like encourage them to mess with these themes and do them in different ways, like the Starwhal with Heartbeat and different things like that. And so it's fantastic to hear you say that, because whenever we have game jams, people either like, we have a lot of people like, it's easier to go with the first thing that pops in your mind, but it's also fun to see. It'd be great and awesome to see something like crazy come out of nowhere with that. And so I can't believe that Starwhal was made with Heartbeat as the theme.
Yeah, and that one actually, we're a little bit close on most of our Game Jam games. So not a lot of those. I played them through the Game Jam site, I think. I don't know if you can go back and dig up old ones. We did a Flash one year where the theme was the Ouroboros, so the circular serpent eating its own tail. And I'm trying now to remember how we even arrived at what we arrived at, because I have no idea. It was a circular. So the idea was you somehow got from the start, went all the way right to the beginning. But that's where it ends. It was a game about fighting cupcakes. It was chocolate versus vanilla. Like I have no idea what that has to do with the Ouroboros devouring its own tail. It was very, very odd. So maybe the cupcakes were eating each other. It was very loose, right? So like there's the theme inspired something, which is what I think it's really there for. Like you say, like what can you do with that theme to make something weird happen?
So then. How did you guys kind of run with it after it became the little breakout hit that it did? How did you guys run with that? Because to start with something small that was probably it had bugs and everything, to like people picking it up and playing it, and then to what now having the full retail release. Like how did you guys roll with that? How did you guys get your game out?
Yeah, so Starwhal had a little bit different. So it's kind of funny. When Starwhal was made initially, Marvin's Mittens was still sitting in Greenlight awaiting the critical mass for approval. And now it's a little bit faster to Greenlight, but for quite a while there, the initial push of Greenlight games was massive, and it was really hard to get through. So what happened with Starwhal is we decided we were going to keep working on it. We're going to work on it a little more. And yeah, there were a lot of questions like, what do you do with that? So the obvious one, because it's a competitive, fighting game, more stages. If we want to do more our environmental stuff, one thing, and this was kind of debated, and I kind of lost this debate, and maybe for the better, was like, do we want to add items? Like how much complexity do we really want to put into the game? Because what we were finding was that people loved the immediacy and simplicity of it. I think one of the neat things about the design is mechanically it's pretty simple. It's pick up and play. It's just different enough for most games most people have played that it's kind of a level playing field. So I really like that we've brought it to a lot of conventions and conferences and things, and put it on show floors. And I think that's a big part of our marketing and kind of how we reach people. But it was really great that in any group of friends, you never really knew who was going to be good at Starwhal. It wasn't always the one who could ace everyone in Smash Brothers or Street Fighter who was necessarily good, because you got really good gamers kind of came into it with an idea and was just like, oh, I don't know, and so it's got the kind of somewhat clunky initially controls. And I think it also has this kind of neat learning curve where initially you're just sort of flopping around, and then you realize oh, I can fly. It has this kind of getting up into the air is not easy initially. Yeah. But you can get there, and then there is some finesse, but always just a little bit of chaos. So it's that good kind of balance that I think that where it's just a little bit awkward, which gives a little bit of anyone may land that hit, but also better players do tend to gradually pick up on things and win more often than not.
So, one of the really cool things about Starwhal is how when you're about to hit somebody else's heart, it's slows down. Was that actually an official? Was that in the original Game Jam release?
It was a
feature all the way
absolutely. Through? Yeah, so Jason is incredibly detail oriented and really likes just making juicy games. Right from a demo, he wants to put in those things.
Thank you for using the word juicy. Thank you.
No problem.
Keep hearing that, but people give some resistance to it for whatever reason, and I'm like, it's the term. People are using that term now. It's the real term.
I do know some industry people who are like, this word is overused, but I guess the idea to me is very, very good, and that famous kind of juicy lecture where they build the breakout clone.
That's the exact. I mean, that's it's the one that coined it. So
yeah, everyone should see that. Some people say crunchy. I guess I know some designers who feel that it's just kind of for a while everyone just said fun or substitute whatever word, and that too many people, I guess too many non-designers have started just saying, well, just juice it up, just make it juicier, when not a lot of specifics are offered. So it can be vague, but the idea is crucial. I think it's a really, really important idea of putting in those little touches, and that video is excellent. It covers so many of them.
It really does. I'll link it in the description.
Because it's great. Anyone who hasn't seen it should, and even if you haven't seen it in a year or two, it's worth rewatching. Every couple of years, I honestly try to rewatch it because it's just such a good testament to there's design, there's abstract, mechanical or mathematical good tight rules. Yeah, and then on the other hand, there's presentation and feel. And those account for so much. You can have a game that's mechanically not that deep that just has an amazing feel. And so Starwhal has, as we sort of talked about, mechanically is kind of just a little bit weird and has a learning curve, and it's almost like a full reset for a group of friends who play fighter games, but you can also play it very casually. But then we did try to do everything we could, the particles, the screen shake, the slowdown, and the slowdown I think is one of the most important ones. Not just to making it fun, but even to selling the game, because we've brought it out to one of the most fun things we did is I'll never forget one time we brought it to a bar in Montreal and we put it on and people sort of saw it and were just like, oh, okay, and went back to drinking their beer and had no idea kind of what was going on. But then the room got really quiet the first time it went into slow motion, and everyone stopped and sort of was like, whoa, that was weird, because the music kind of ducked down. We actually had these big speakers, and so and then they're like, oh, that was kind of weird. And then people started paying attention, and then the next time, it went to slow motion, and someone actually landed a hit, and honestly, people started cheering, and I was just like, that is so amazing. It was so gratifying. But so much of that is because it slows down the action, which is neat for the players. It does actually. We fine-tuned it, not in the original, but in later versions, you actually get slightly more torque. So it slows down to 50% speed, but your head moves at like 70% speed. So everything's slower, but you can move a little faster. So you have this fine grain, tusk fighting ability to really close the deal. But because it's so easy to see and understand what's happening in those moments of slow motion, it makes it really edge of your seat, right? It makes it really thrilling because you're just like, oh my god, near miss, or oh my god, hit. And I really think that does so much of selling the action of the game. Just that one little detail.
Yeah.
And it was in right there from the first weekend. We had some of the nice particles. I think we did have some screen shake. We did try to do, and this is one thing at the game jams we participate in. We are one of the only teams that does such thorough original sound, and that's I kind of pushed for that. That's my background. But we try to get sound and either bring some decent speakers or have headphones. I don't know of that many Game Jam games that like have recorded dialogue, and Starwhal is not a case where we did. Yeah. But 2 of our other Game Jams had a lot of kind of fun dialogue, and so we kind of pride ourselves on and that's a big part of the juicy kind of loop is having the audiovisual feedback.
Yeah, and actually, one of your games, I can't remember which one. It's the one about the queen not catching the king as he gets in from a night out or whatever.
Flim Fernandez.
Yes,
I love that one. Yes,
it's it'll be down in the description for everybody who wants to check it out. But it's a game about like a king coming home from a night out and he has to get in bed before the queen catches him, and it's a fun game. Right, yeah. But now, if I'm not mistaken, did you guys make that? You said you made a game out of clay, like the entire visuals were made out of clay.
Yep,
like real life clay.
Yeah.
And then you just photographed it and put it in the game.
Yeah, and I actually found that was a really good art pipeline for a game jam because everyone on our team, I don't know, it was probably 5 or 6 people, got really into it and started like that. I will fully take credit for that. That was like, I'm like, we should make it out of plasticine, and people were like, I don't know, Mike, that's silly. But one guy had a really good camera, and we set it up, and we just put some paper behind. It was a pain in the ass when you're racing the clock doing a game jam, and everyone on the has to stop what they're doing and just help clean up, like just do the cutout kind of. Photoshop's pretty good, but magic wand. But then just cleaning up all the edges, there was a lot of like edge cleaning to cut out all the assets. But then we did quite frankly, pretty stiff animation, pretty minimal animation. Yeah. But it works in context and. I really like, stuff like that, plasticine, kind of hand painted, whatever you can do like that. Marvin also is looks very hand painted. It's all digital painting, but because it gives a little bit of noise, a little bit of just grit and texture. Your art assets they kind of feel lovingly crafted and feel. It
adds like a natural layer of juiciness to it. It adds like those details that you maybe wouldn't be able to do by hand. You can't add like the little cracks that happens in the clay. You can't add that by hand. You could, but like it just happens naturally. It's easy. You get it out of the way, and you got juice.
Yep, exactly. So everyone really got into that, and that one was based on Marvin's Mittens. So we kind of used the art because it was our own engine. So we just loaded up the assets and then designed kind of the game of sneaking, and it was. It's almost like 2-player Where's Waldo. That was very, very well received at the jam, and I would love to someday revisit that idea because it was fun. People liked it. They were silly, fun, lovable characters.
Definitely go check it out. Yeah, for anybody who's listening to this or watching or whatever, like go check it out. It's really is like I'm gonna say the word adorable, but like the art that you guys did with the clay, it makes the game look different. You guys did a fantastic job with that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah,
no problem. But another thing that you mentioned was the audio. So you mentioned that you have a bit of a background in audio. So why don't you talk a little bit about that? What do you mean by audio?
Okay. So I mean, what I was responsible for many years in my first job, which I was just super lucky to get, right out of, I actually did my university co-op there. So I was doing all of the voice recording, sound design, and music for a company in Ottawa called Artec Studios.
So you did pretty much all of it. I mean, you did did you also engineer the sound, like give it the levels and everything like that?
Yep. Yeah, okay. Absolutely everything. I mean, I didn't do the final implementation. I worked closely with audio programmers to do the implementation. Yeah. Sometimes we had nice kind of middleware, so like Fmod in those days, Exact for Xbox stuff.
Yeah. So what do you mean by implementation? That's something I've never heard.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So I mean, you have all these nice audio assets usually you get a sound designer, composer, voice talent to make, your files, like your audio files.
Yeah.
You have this pile of them. So now, what do you do with them? Because how they get triggered in game, it can be very simple. It can just be, like when you do a certain action in the game, the code just, at its simplest, just, play sound, play it once, and then you're done. But it gets, significantly more complicated depending on what you want to do. So, play sound, then there's looping sounds. Then what if you want music that has multiple layers? Or, do you want to just play the same one sound over and over and over again is always the question. That's a retro, like the paradigm is, Mario picks up a coin and it's the same cha-ching kind of sound every single time he gets a coin. But modern sound design tends to have, several variations. And sometimes you'll just have the one sound and you'll change the pitch a little bit up and down, just a little bit of variance, or the volume, some like randomized pitch and volume. But what does that, right? Does your code do it, or are you using some off-the-shelf solution? So when I say audio middleware, for people using Unity, it actually is based on Fmod. Is that right? And so Unity has a bunch of built-in sound features. So some people, I don't know, there's probably a lot of people out there who are like, what do you need this middleware for? So current Fmod does a lot more than the off-the-shelf kind of embedded in Unity features, but it does have, play sound and then play it at different pitches, change the volume, do all these things. Or for like a particular sound, the ability to hook up a bunch of variations. But like some good sounds, I guess, either mixed live in the game or mixed beforehand, are often like a stack of different sounds. So like to have a really, again, sort of juicy sound, you'll have your gunshot, but maybe you have a layer of a thump in there and like whatever material it's hitting, and it can be this really complex in terms of the actual assets, the audio files underneath that are getting triggered, like 10 different audio files for certain events. And you can either pre-mix them all and just say play that one sound, or you could have these different kind of layers. And then
different triggers and stuff. Like if you're thinking about like Unity, like different triggers. If this raycast hits the metal, then make the metal clink sound as a and also the gun sound. What different things like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I worked on another project in town in Ottawa called Windforge, which was this cool sort of kind of like Terraria, but with airships that you build. Okay. And so that had some pretty complex stuff going on in terms of like the jackhammer. And so you're playing this looping jackhammer sound and an impact sound for the actual hammer hitting stuff, and a destruction sound for whatever material, and then a block destroy, a block pickup. So like there's this whole chain of events. Every time you kind of activate this jackhammer, a lot of things could potentially be playing. So it had a pretty complex kind of soundscape.
Cool.
So that's what I mean by implementation can get pretty in depth, and bigger teams, bigger companies will have dedicated sound, a whole team of programmers and audio engineers and sound designers all working together. So most stuff I've been working on, I'm lucky to get one or two programmers to help me, and then I do a lot of the design and just the hooking up of sounds, just like play this sound at this volume, and that's the whole mixing side is usually in the engine. Somewhere you'll specify what volumes. You could try and have everything just be the right volume to begin with. I've never succeeded. I try. I make best guesses. But usually you can spend, to have a really polished sound for your game can take a really long time just mixing, just playing the game, and I often do it just by taking notes, like the gunshot was, a little bit too loud, this explosion was way too loud, this voice was impossible to hear, and just going through and just fine-grained kind of adjusting. On the subject of voice too low, another thing you get, usually not in smaller indie productions, but sometimes you have sort of dynamic ducking systems where if you're playing voice, say, you'll lower everything else. A lot of games do have like a pause menu that will either lower or mute everything, but sometimes, just while anyone's talking, you lower the volume of everything else. So there's sort of this hierarchical mix. DICE are the masters of this. I think we're gonna get some of the best sounding Star Wars we've ever had soon. We'll see with Battlefront, but like all of the games just have for a number of years have these crazy hierarchical mixes.
But no, yeah, thanks for actually shedding a lot of light on the audio stuff, because we have the issue of not having a lot of audio designers. We have a small music tech minor at our school, but we don't have a lot of people it's already small, and then trying to find people who are interested in music tech and then also game design is like, your odds aren't very high. But one thing that is never talked about, like, is, you know, the composition versus the implementation. So yeah, you can be the composer or whatever, but then being the person who implements it into the game, everybody thinks that's like a programmer's job, and, you know, programmers do that. Like, something that they do, but to be in line with the person who creates it is a really solid thing. So
yeah, and I would say it's much more common on bigger teams, like in big pro game development, to have a sound designer very involved, if not doing most of the implementation. And whenever you are using kind of the audio middleware, it's very much the sound team, like the content creation side, are the ones who are usually hooking it up, putting it right into, you know, if it's Fmod or Miles or WYs, those are some of the big off-the-shelf ones. They have a whole nice UI that's there just for people to drag their sounds in, set the volume, set how it fades in, fades out, all these curves. There's all this great stuff you can do. You know, how it loops, when to choose a new variation. You can even design pretty elaborate dynamic music systems, so you can say exactly how it transitions. Does it fade in? Is there a cymbal crash? Whatever, to hide these kind of transitions and make sure that it all feels really, really good. And usually, all you're asking from the programmer at the end of the day is like, okay, you know, like, hey Pete, could you set the music variable to 2 whenever you're under fire from more than 3 guys, or, you know, like whatever triggers you kind of decide on. If you go down, if you're falling, you know, set music to, trigger to 5. And usually it's that simple as like there's just like a number or some variable is set somewhere, and everything else could be handled by the content team. So that is a very kind of intersection of technical and creative stuff that's really unique and really fun. I would say there are a lot of sound designers out there. That's actually, in my opinion, one of the most competitive. And I can speak to Breakfall has had, in terms of people like, hey, do you need help with, you know, XYZ? A lot of people have applied for sound jobs or to provide music for us. And music is much more common than sound design. But if you're interested in getting into that, it is good to know some sound design and to know a little bit about the implementation. But yeah. Cool. And if you look around online, if you're trying to look for sound, there are a lot of people out there trying to kind of break. I find, you know, maybe that's just Ottawa versus like just wherever you are. But there are definitely a lot of good people doing a lot of good music who are looking for, you know, game projects that if that game is going to be released in any form, would be happy to have their music and sound design in it. So
yeah. That's really cool then. Okay, well, which one do you prefer? Do you prefer creating or being like on the implementation side? Or what's your favorite? Like, what's your favorite part about audio and audio design?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it probably is just writing music. But like my two passions, like why I got to where I'm at, are music and games, and I love playing a game and hearing that suits it well in the game. So it's kind of like I really do like sound design. I've got really attached to some of the weirder and cooler sound design I've done.
Yeah.
So it's not to say I get a little bored when it's just trying to do super realistic stuff. I really appreciate people who do the realistic stuff. You know, like I don't know, maybe I would have a blast if I ever got to do it, but like the idea of doing a really realistic racing game to me doesn't sound as interesting. Like just recording engines and like and then implementing them again in the middleware. But like if faced with that challenge, it might be really, really cool. I don't know. I really like doing bizarre science fiction and surreal. Like Starwhal was a lot of fun to design the sounds because like what do narwhals in space sound like? Well, if they're narwhals in space, nothing. But you know, our narwhals in space can sound like whatever we want.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, you know, pure creative freedom to do whatever you like. And just try weird, wacky things. So I like doing the sound, like digital sound manipulation and editing more than recording, I guess. Because some people are really, really into the recording and they just want to, you know, get the right microphone for the job and just, you know, that pristine recording. I enjoy doing that stuff, but I'm not as good as some of the people I've met. But at the end of the day, like I love just sitting in the studio, you know, just I can get lost for hours and hours, forget to eat, you know, just like zone out and have some neat music written. And that's probably one of my favorite things to do for sure. So cool. I like it all, but yeah.
Okay. So then when we talked earlier, you had mentioned that you've also done not only just audio things, but you've done a lot with being like high level design, and you called it Design Prime. Let's start with that. What do you mean by Design Prime?
That's a good question. That was a title I was once told I held on a particular project, but I think it was just setting up the initial design. Sort of at that point, it was a pitch document, so it was a very different sort of process. Where instead of just making a wacky game in 48 hours, I got to work on a really cool Star Wars game, Star Wars Rebels Recon Missions. So that's for iOS and Android. Oh, popping my headphones out. Still have audio?
Yeah, no, yeah, you're still good. Don't worry, everything's all good.
And I sort of worked with the lead people there to get just onto paper, like what's the high level concept? What does this game play like? What are the enemies we're going to have? So, how are we going to make enemies out of a set of stormtroopers? Because we don't want just stormtroopers that shoot. Like, what else can we do? Can we pull in? It's Star Wars. There's so much to work with. I'm a big Star Wars fan, so but just the early, very, very high level, like, what do you do moment to moment in this game, and kind of describing the gameplay. And in some cases, what we wrote was very similar to the final experience. In some cases, there's some significant departures. Like, because we started with this and we pitched it to Disney and Lucas. We got a lot of feedback, and there was a lot of that was very, very monitored. Working with not just one major company but two was, from my perspective, it was actually, I found them a really good external team to work with during the design process. But yeah, things, we did occasionally kind of butt heads on things, and we wanted to do things internally, and brand requirements come in, and you can never use a lightsaber like that, like things like that, right?
Yeah.
So it's neat when you're working on a licensed property. Applies less to like indie development and game jams and stuff. But when you do have these other restrictions, I kind of like the way that can guide your design. I find it an interesting challenge to, like, okay, well, here we have this thing, and we're doing an action platformer. How do we want to reflect this idea that you see in, like, this new animated series? And we're watching all the episodes. And how do we? This guy has, like, a cool, like, bow staff that then converts into, like, a sniper rifle. So what are we going to take from sort of limited mobile controls to make that feel like a good run and gun experience? And so you have these kind of fun design meetings, and then a lot of it is writing down, just writing down these ideas. I have lots of ideas on that too. So it's interesting doing design documentation for a team of any size, really.
What did you mean by you have lots of ideas on that too? Like, are you talking about, like, writing down?
No. This is sort of what I was going to get into, is just in terms of writing a design document, and maybe your team's small enough you never need to.
Yeah.
But it's having worked with a few teams of different sizes, it is very, very interesting to see. I guess, what's your motivation for writing this document? Why are you doing it? And how good does it have to be? So if you're pitching something to a publisher ever, you have to sound confident. You have to put ideas down. They should be the ideas you want. You want to reflect accurately where you think this design is going. When you're writing internal documentation, you really have to make sure it's going to be read by someone. And I guess the big picture is that no one really wants to sit down and read anything. I work with some programmers who do, but you can really write specs that just no one ever reads again, and so you have to make sure you have to know your team, I guess, and, like, make sure sometimes you're writing down a spec that only you will read to refer to when they ask you a question a month later. But, like, it's important to be like, okay, let's all sit down and talk over, like, read through this together. Just make sure that these ideas are ever heard.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, for me, like, design, and that, especially that high-level design, or writing specification for, here's an enemy, here's how it's going to behave, and doing little horrible napkin drawings and, like, all these things, that's fun, and that's kind of this armchair design idea a lot of people have, what it's like to be a game designer. But a big part of it is also just knowing and understanding and working with your team. I like to think of the best design, like, when I've been doing it really well, very, very collaborative, because you can put anything to paper, but if you don't understand a little bit of how it's going to be implemented, if you have to work with your programmers and artists and everyone else, and listen to, part of it is listening to everyone's ideas and only writing down the best ones, so you're just a bit of a filter. But I don't feel like most of the time designers should be the only ones coming up with ideas. Like, that's kind of, you get, junior designers, and myself included, are more concerned with, well, did this idea come from me? And it's like that's not even what it's about. You know, it's what's best for the game.
Yeah.
And what can you do, and how is this going to kind of come together with the team? And the flip side is also that if you do have really good ideas and specific ideas, making sure not just the people are reading it, the people sometimes, just the communication and understanding. Like if I say that this applies fire damage to something, and some crazy programmer's like, well, I have this idea for this system, and it could be any elemental damage, but ultimately at the end of the day, it doesn't apply damage over time because he wrote some crazy idea he had is what got coded instead of something that behaves like fire. You may have a problem later. Like I know some situations where, your coders go rogue, not understanding the higher level design goals. I don't know. Is this rambling making sense?
No, yeah, no. It's perfect actually because we get a lot of people who like come into our club and I know a lot of people who have that armchair kind of idea of what game design is, where they think I just sit at you can just sit at a table and then they come to you for ideas and then they go do it. Yeah. So it's really great to hear somebody who actually is like talking about how collaborative it is, how you listen to the designers and programmers and audio guys because they're gonna have as good of ideas as anybody else, and so it's really a lot about getting them to work together and everything like that. So continue more with the rogue programmer and where you were kind of gonna go with that. Has that happened to you before?
So I mean, the particular instance I know of that I'm thinking of most is actually not something that happened directly to me, but it was another friend at a local company, and they had very, very particular design requirements, and this one programmer went and started writing something different, and I think the game shipped with grenades that didn't deal the damage that was intended because it was a multiplayer game, and things were supposed to happen in a certain sequence, and they didn't because someone kind of over-architected or had this weird idea. But no, this is how the system should work. I've had sort of on smaller scale. I have had like funny things happen with because programmers are brilliant problem solvers, amazing people. Like a good gameplay programmer is just like the mind you need to have is phenomenal. But sometimes they're also very, very straight up odd people. So I've had debates with people like on the sound side. There was one time where I was working on a game about submarines, and there was this constant low rumbling. And I'm like, where is this coming from? This doesn't make any sense. There's no sound I put in the game that sounds like that. And I was literally going through all the sound files, and I kind of captured it from the game. I'm like, okay, here's a case where it's happening. And I was just going and checking sounds against it, kind of A/B test. And finally I'm like, it sounds a bit like just the frequencies, the tone of it sounds kind of like the sound when a torpedo hits the hull. There's some of that in there. And finally I realized I had a kind of an argument with a programmer who his whole way of thinking was very simulation oriented, and we had talked about he wanted the bow splash, like constant, like just the waves crashing against any ship. You should hear that. And my contention had been, sound design for movies and games, audio in movies and games is more selective. It represents things in a more focused way. So you're not just you're not just playing everything. You're kind of just picking and choosing. It's kind of like the audio should draw the listener's attention to this explosion's happening, or this gunfire's happening.
Right.
But not just play everything all the time because that's just cacophony. It's tons of sound and it's confusing. So anyways, we had debated back and forth on this, and I didn't realize that he had thought in his mind he won this debate and went ahead and implemented a bow splash sound. And he chose for that a sound that did have a splash in it, but it was the torpedo hitting the hull and the splash of the waves there. And so this was being triggered like 400 times a second. And all those instances, I saw the fly that time. I saw it.
You did? Okay, yeah, no, I'm not crazy. There's a fly in here.
Yeah, there is a fly. But yeah, so anyways, the result was just this constant droning noise that never stopped. And I finally, I'm like, okay, now that I know what it is, got him to disable that. And we, But it's just sort of, again, it was like this sound that got added was not to spec, as you might say, and it was a pain in the ass to fix. So you can get things where people are on different pages and someone just goes ahead and tries something and it doesn't work, but then requires fixing later. I've had the fortune generally of working with really good people. people and keeping lines of communication open. And yeah, I don't have a lot of real disaster stories. I mean, there was another fun bug in one game where the buoyancy of airships, this is not the recent airship game, but a much older one, was frame rate dependent. And this was just, one of these implementation decisions. So if the game slowed down at all, the skyships started falling out of the sky, like the balloons. But you just get weird things when things are not, all sorts of bugs. And so sometimes it's bugs, sometimes it's more just like systems design things. Sometimes it's one programmer has to pick up where someone else was working on something, and just the way it was being designed, from an implementation perspective. Or we're going to implement it this way, and someone else gets their hands on it. It's just like, oh my god, that doesn't work at all with this other system. Or there's lots of things can go very, very wrong. And I mean, the end of the day, it's all about communication, and I think good design is as much it almost bleeds a bit into project management, I think, when it's done well. Like, sure, there's the production schedule and all that, but it's making sure people are working towards a common goal. Like, you're setting the goals maybe more than the actual schedule, but it's understanding how and why your systems would be set up in certain ways and conveying that to the team. Like, it's not just like, okay, go code me, a bomb. It's like, okay, we need a bomb and we want to break these sorts of walls and damage players in an area and not damage people through the floors. And sometimes it is about having a meeting. People are very split on, talking through ideas. Some people are perfectly happy to talk all day and like waste a day almost. Other people are just like, I don't want to talk about it, just let me do it. Somewhere in the middle there is a path of sanity where you understand the goals and why, and sometimes you talk through things and realize that there are some crazy holes in what you're doing, or what happens in this interaction. And so a good designer kind of tries to stay on top of that too, and know, like, before there's a significant problem, that like, oh, when this thing happens in the game, it's going to look really weird or cause some other thing to explode, or, figure these things out, foresee them as much as possible. But, and also, I mean, a good deal I find of the high level design versus like nitty gritty level design, you do also spend quite a bit of time. Ideally, you get a lot of things exposed. So you have all these exposed variables and parameters, so that you can kind of tune damage or tune the reward systems, make sure, okay, how fast are we earning XP? What's the rate of in-game money we're accumulating? How much damage does this do? One thing that I did not that long ago, sort of my last hurrah at the mobile game company I was working at, was we had worked on. So I mostly worked on that Star Wars game, and it was awesome. It was excellent. But there was a parallel, there was some development going on before that. I got moved on to the Star Wars thing, but they also made an X-Men game. And it was a really, really cool game, but it shipped with just there were a few things that didn't feel as good as they could, and it was just having to do so much of it was just damage tables. It was this huge table of like, when I punch a box, why does it take 3 hits to kill a box? Or like, if you have a super move, that should probably take out the lowest level minion kind of level enemies. So like, if you're just fighting punks, why does Wolverine have to execute like 2 or 3 like super backflip spins just to take out like this one dude with a gun, right? Like, so I spent forever just a lot of time just in there running the game, and it's just like the audio, like fine tuning the volume, like the mix of audio is kind of similar. Just making sure the attacks felt right. Like, this animation, this looks like it should be doing more damage. So there's that aesthetic, that, again, the juicy component versus the mechanical component. And there were mechanical reasons sometimes, like, we want this guy to last 3 hits. Like, this dinosaur, it's not what it looks like. We just need this dinosaur to last 3 hits because the level designer had pieced this whole thing together. And if you just blast through all these enemies, then you miss the meteor shower that comes next, that kind of thing. So, you don't want to just mess with things high level without looking at the intent that designers have been using, like level designers, I should say, have been using all the pieces either. But there's a lot to be said for just playing your game a lot, and if you can have the game with these exposed parameters, making sure they're all sort of as close to perfect as you can get them. And that's something, so we talk about Starwhal going from 48-hour game jam game to, the final product. And, a lot of people might think that the gameplay feels pretty similar, and deliberately it does. But we did also spend a lot of time on those little things like I was mentioning, like just how much torque do you have on your head, how fast do you accelerate, just really, really fine-tuning the physics. And that's a symmetrical game where you and the other player play as pretty much the same Starwhal. It gets like really complicated if you're all different fighters and how you balance all that. But, even in Starwhal, we did a lot of balancing in it, not to make sure that, any one Starwhal is better than another, but just to make sure that it felt as good as possible.
Yeah.
And so there was,
Yeah, so that was, so as like an overall design, you kind of touch, like as a lead designer, you touch on a lot of different things. You have your hand a little bit everywhere, I guess, with that. I mean, that's what it sounded like, and I hope that's right.
Yeah. I mean, so for Starwhal, again, mostly I did I really focused on audio.
Yeah.
I helped build a bunch of the single player challenges. I got a lot more involved in that stage of the process. Really, it was other team members who were more focused on the kind of micro control issues.
Yeah.
So I can't take a lot of credit there for just the feel of the multiplayer, but yeah, it definitely was. So Breakfall, I mean, I'm not. We all sort of just work well together, and everyone. So when you have a really small team, you get more people wearing more hats.
Yeah.
That was just a big collaboration where we'd all sit down and play the game. And how's it feeling? How's it feeling now? How are we doing with that? So
no, it sounds you really have helped shed a lot of light on if you want to be. I mean, so like. With the armchair kind of idea, I really like to use the word armchair, but like with the armchair idea of like the gamer, that there isn't necessarily a place for someone like that, but if that's what you enjoy is how systems work and everything like that, this design kind of role is a great way of doing that. But it does take a lot of teamwork. It takes a lot of making sure that you know how to work with other people and everything like that. And it sounds like from you, no matter what size team. So
yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, exactly. Communication, collaboration. One of the things I guess has a big shift for me over many years in the game industry is sort of this slowly dawning epiphany that it's not about the idea. Because a lot of people think, especially people who don't even necessarily play a lot of games but have no industry experience whatsoever, you just kind of think like, well, here's my game idea, and they'll pitch, it's a dinosaur that breathes fire and he's killing all these vampires, and it's super, super high level, like this high concept thing. I won't say worthless, because sometimes you can get really neat, like Starwhal's fighting in space, or Narwhals, I keep calling them Starwhals, but Narwhals fighting in space is a silly and kind of great idea. Because you have, a lot of people think, and it's great or not, but it's really more about the decisions that the programmer makes when they're implementing it, and that can be like, just every line of code can impact like how are inputs handled, how frame by frame, how is this calculated, and all those things. The sum of all those little details matters a lot more than in the final reckoning than the high level. I mean, it's in service of high level idea. Yeah, but if you don't have someone who knows about these little, tiny little details, enough to put in the juicy things, like I really don't believe Starwhal would have been half the game it was without that slow motion, and that's not a high level concept. That's not a part of the pitch. It's not even really a game rule. I mean, we turned into it later.
Yeah, I can hear you. No.
Okay, good.
I can hear you.
A connection problem.
The quality, like the audio quality went down, but it's no big deal. Our viewers can deal with it.
Like a sweet robot.
But
it's really just about all these little details.
Yeah.
They matter so much more than the armchair designer sitting there and being like, "Whoa, we need more of this." Now maybe the designer is the one who says we need slow motion, but it's just there's a lot of, again, communication, collaboration. That's what makes good game design, I find. So
cool. Well, I don't have any more real questions. We talked about a lot of different stuff, so I guess this is kind of closing to the end. So you get to answer our final question for all these videos. What is your favorite game ever of all time?
Oh, geez. Okay. Yeah, that's a really hard question. Do people struggle with this a ton?
Everyone does. Every single person struggles with this question. It's fantastic.
Starwhal. No, I'm going to come out with. I'm gonna go back to Donkey Kong Country 2.
Really?
Yeah, that's the game that made me want to write music for games specifically. It was the first Donkey Kong Country was like the first console that we got. We got a Super Nintendo right when that came out.
Mm-hmm. Uh-oh.
I was a kid. I had a Game Boy, but yeah, that was yeah. I
Okay,
like Donkey Kong Country.
we cut out again. It's a good thing we're at the end because it seems we're cutting out. But it cut out at the Super Nintendo was the first console that you got.
Okay, yeah. Anyways, not lots of nostalgia for when I was a kid. That was the home console that we had. That's when we owned one in the house, and yeah, the Donkey Kong Country series and 2 is just the best in that series. Although the new ones are pretty darn good too.
Yeah, they have great reviews, and I've never played them. I had a hard time.
Yeah. Well, that's it. It's if you're into developing games, it gets hard to play games. But I mean, I like lots of stuff. I really like sandbox games. I've really gotten into mobile games having worked at a mobile company. It's interesting. It's interesting how they're different and the same. There's lots of interesting stuff going on there. So, but
cool.
Yeah, that's my answer.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for talking to us. You've I can't get across enough how much you've actually I answered a lot of questions that we always have. So thank you so much.
Great.
So yeah. Hey guys. Welcome back to Endslate. This is the last ever Endslate of Season 1, and it's kind of a somber note. But it's not too somber because Season 2 is officially confirmed. Season 2 is going to be in production next semester and the summer after that. So we're really excited to be interviewing new people. But thank you everybody who's been on the show already. We love you guys. We love everybody who's watched these videos and left comments. You guys really are the reason we do this. And make sure people are seeing this. Anybody who's interested in this kind of stuff. But recently we also put out a video that addresses r/game dev. If any of you guys want to go see that, we'll introduce more people to the club, more executives. Go say hi to them. It's pretty cool. Yeah. I really don't have too much more to say though, because I'm kind of busy. But, make sure you guys go check out the Yeti. We love them. You know why we love them. Yeti are great. Go check them out. Great t-shirts. Blah, blah, blah. Everything. But other than that, you know what, guys? Just stay fresh. Keep it cool. We love you. I'm signing off. See ya.